I asked the organizers, what would you like to discuss? And they said it's an assembly of people who are at various stages of their marketing career, then partner entities, etc. We are all, every day, several times a day, encountering this fear of AI, AGI. It's been built up to a level where everything will change. There will be no jobs left. You know, your entity and identity will be kidnapped right in front of your eyes. The world is divided between what they call the doomers and the boomers. And they have an interesting concept called P-doom, probability that all of us will die. Now, we did not need artificial intelligence or artificial general intelligence to know that P-doom equals 1, right? We will all eventually die. Whether or not it happens because there is some megalomaniacal coming together of several artificial general intelligence pieces, that is what we will discuss. But before we get to what is the change we will encounter, we need to understand the context from which that change emerges. And the thing that's got everybody excited about artificial general intelligence is the prevalence now of competing large language models. So mankind has placed a super premium on something that has linguistic ability. If it's able to answer you back, you think it has inspired intelligence. Artificial intelligence in many ways is the supreme example of educated guessing, but it's been done on a scale and with a quantum of impact that has never been seen before. So we will discuss some of that. I thought it takes a brave person to come and speak about artificial intelligence, because by the time I'm done with these 20-odd minutes, the things would have changed. The doubling speed right now is about 5 to 8 months, which is compared to the Moore's law for microprocessing chips was 24 months. So every 4 to 5 months, everything that you knew effectively can go into the shredder because something new has emerged altogether. But let me begin by saying that this is not the fire that emerges out of a matchstick. You can't blow it off. It is more the phenomenon of a forest fire that will eventually, any obstacle that comes in its way will be consumed in that process, because it then immediately becomes a use case. And this we are seeing on an everyday basis, and I will explain. But let me also set some context, and I thought as a personal touch. This is the fort of Shergarh. It's near Atru in the Bara district of Rajasthan, the southeastern portal to Rajasthan. It borders Malwa. My lineal family had a connection with this place for as long as we have been around, but certainly we got there from Malwa in the middle of the 12th century. Between then and we have a token allegiance to the place. We go there from time to time, particularly for religious observations. And then what happened to this place? For about 400, 500 years after the family got here, nothing. And then in the middle of the 15th century, we cannot put an exact date to it because we don't know whether it was the sultans of Malwa or the Portuguese mercenaries working for the sultans of Gujarat. But at some point in time, gunpowder appeared. And gunpowder with large cannons, which became much better than battering rams. So a big fort with a tall wall or a high wall, it was no protection against the change that was happening outside. The problem is when you build a fort, and I'm talking about our own domain intelligence, when we build a legacy domain intelligence, when we build a castle, a fort, we are looking down at the world and change comes from outside. Those who are outside have high caliber guns to blow your walls off. But you have to wait for them to approach the walls before you need small caliber cannons to actually aim at the congregation. Which is why, as an interesting aside, if you go to forts, any fort that has a moat outside or a low wall or a thick wall has emerged after the era of gunpowder fired cannons. Anything that is on a hill or has high walls, does not have a moat fortification, has emerged before the world of cannons. This single development, through not only my family but several others in that constant state of churn that did not then cease pretty much through till India's independence. Because after that was the Mughal incursion, then there was the British, the expansion of the Maratha Empire, all of these things combined together because they did not have the one technical capability, which is to forge and cast and create a mold for a small caliber gun, which they could mount on the fort and take on the several forces of changes, some friendly, some enemies. This is a western wall. This river is called the Parban River. This, by the way, the fort is called Koshvardhan. It was built, there is an inscription there from 790 AD, much before anything that we knew about this place. Later, of course, they did procure, and if you see, this is an 8-pounder gun. This is what is called a man-of-war gun, which the British used to have in their ships. Because in a ship, you can't have a large caliber gun. It recoils, and it's parked in the galley. So this is the kind of technology they needed. But for 500 years, they were living, dying, escaping in a radius of 250 kilometers, simply because the forces of change had a gun, and they did not know how to put the two together. And of course, it was restricted technology. At the pain of death would, just like many technical advancements in the era of software, are till date, restricted. People will not sell it to you no matter how far you go looking for them. So the point is, either you adapt or you die. Now, luckily in our era, you don't physically die, but your culture, the way in which you consume marketing objects, the way in which your career shapes will grow rather fast or rather slowly, depending on how we are. Right now, generative AI is at what is called the peak of its hype cycle, and now there will inevitably be a trough of disillusionment. Why? Because AI is not new. If you leave your refrigerator door open and it beeps, that is artificial intelligence. If you walk into a room where you have sensor-operated lighting, that is artificial intelligence. If your Google search prompts the next word, that is artificial intelligence. Almost all of the performance media that we do is driven by artificial intelligence. It has been in our imagination, it has been in our culture, in fiction, for a long, long time. What we did not have is the ability to do language. And so what has happened in the last 5 years commercially, and since OpenAI got ChatGPT, it has happened commercially as well, is these large pre-trained language models can suck up everything that you have on the internet. It's like talking to Sheldon multiplied by 1 billion, right? So he knows everything, and you can have a conversation with him about everything. How does that work? They suck up the information. That is relatively easy to do. So within my domain, I can do all the single view of customer and single view of vehicle, for example, can be uploaded. But the system has to be pre-trained. And that pre-training is something only very, very large corporations are able to afford at this time. It is guesstimated that for the free internet, today pre-training, the commercial models have operated at between $100 to $200 million. In another 2 years, that cost of pre-training will get to $1 billion and then eventually to $10 billion, which means that even if you have open source, even if you are able to play in that domain, you will not have enough free data available on the internet to be able to large-scale train your program. Why is training important? Because then it understands how to create a token. So if I say, Vipul and I went to a party last night and we had a ball. Generally speaking, it does not understand whether you're referring to a ball that you kick as in playing football, or you had a ball as in you went to a ball dance, or you had a ball as in emotionally you had a great time. But once it is pre-trained, because it goes through every literal example of something that has happened in this manner, it begins to relate. When they say they had a ball, they mean they had a great time. That tokenization, that auto prompt, that fill in the blanks is what is causing so much euphoria. It is basically enormously scaled up fill in the blanks exercise, but it has potency for change. Let me explain that. Why should we hope? Because there are investments which will not be scaled back. Last year alone, in open source AI, $50 billion worth of investment went only in the United States. In China, we don't know as much. The figures are not currently circulated as much. The applications, from doing surgery to passing a law exam, every kind of intelligence is being tested against the applications on a large language model. There is also a very large movement to get to open source, which is promising for the smaller startups. And most importantly, this is the best AI you have ever had, and at the same time, this is the worst AI you have ever had. And if all developments in artificial intelligence ceased at this very moment, even then, you will live life differently and civilization will change forever. If they decided no more AI, suppose there was a law, even then, what we have already managed to create has a life of its own. But why hype? Because there are very few commercial use cases. So all of us would have seen Meta on WhatsApp. Many of us may be using other large language models, free or subscriber versions. But I'm saying this from painful experience. If you have not spent 250 to 300 hours minimum on 3 large language models and trained it to, because it's like talking to a very intelligent human being. It can get stubborn, it can get emotional, it can throw up quirky results, it hallucinates all the time. So there is a Shubhranshu Singh who happens to be in the US, a professor of semiconductors physics in some university. So even though I have not earned a PhD in semiconductors, it often rewards me with that, because it is hallucinating, because it doesn't make that distinction. There is also data availability. People are being trained on synthetic data. But most importantly, there is structural monopolism, which means somebody new emerges, the big guys will go and buy them or they will bury them. This is a fact. This has been happening in the world of social networks and social media. It has been happening in the behind the curtains operating of the internet, and now it is just fully in view where AI is concerned. Now, everybody who operates at that scale needs to be an Amazon, an Oracle, a Microsoft, or a Google. And there is a dearth of licensed skill users. If I may check, how many here have subscription for 2 large language model applications? Can you raise your hand? There we go. It's barely any number at all. So, then everything becomes like breaking news headline, right? Oh, your job is going. Oh, your car will never be resold again without artificial intelligence. And we wonder because we are not interacting enough with it. So let's go through some. Now, the one intelligent thing about artificial general intelligence is that it is a signifier. What does that mean? If I speak to you in English, every word that I am saying has an independent meaning. Say I say, like I said, fort. Fort, in your head, you may have a visual sense of a fort, or you will give yourself other language. A fort is an enclosed piece of land which has very strong walls, built for military purposes. This is, to explain one word, you are using a host of other words. What is military? Military means violence. What is violence? So it is an endless loop of signification. In business, there is no endless loop of signification. If I am wanting to utilize people to have an easy free service experience, there are 3 or 4 discrete steps. And after that, I need to get the job done physically. So it is much easier in business applications for this to ramp up than in generally the encyclopedic knowledge that we are all fascinated by. And most people have vanity. So when you go to a new large language model, you say, who is Shubhranshu Singh? अच्छा, इसने मेरे बारे में ज़्यादा बताया, this one is a good model. उस वाले ने नहीं बताया, it is a bad model. And unlike software, it keeps churning. So twice in a row, if you ask the same thing, spaced apart by time, you will get fairly different results. What is the condition for artificial general intelligence that impacts us all? One is the variety and diversity of topics. The second is tasks. It is a learning system as against a software. Most people confuse and commonly misuse the word software with artificial intelligence. Software is a piece of code that repetitively, assuredly does the same thing time and again, time and again, time and again. If you write a code for 3 plus 3, it will give you the answer 6 every single time. But artificial intelligence is a dynamic and inherently unstable system. So it learns, it pulls in that understanding and iteratively improves. And nobody knows, even those who are designing it, nobody can give you a manual for it. Nobody knows how good or bad it will get at things. So for example, if it was software, it should be really supremely good at numerical ability, which we know it is not. But surprisingly, it is good at developing insights, giving you ideas, doing creative visualization. What that means is that it's learning. And many of us would know the example of this system beat AlphaGo was a program that beat Lee Sedol, who was the reigning champion in Go, WHC. It's a board game. It's the most fluid board game that exists in the world. It's a game essentially of encirclement and strategy. No programmer could write a code for it. Chess was like easy in comparison to this because it is fluid. But because this system learns by playing itself iteratively, it mastered, and as far back as 2018, it beat the reigning champion. Now, when billions of people have commercially available large language models, the number of changes that will be on us will be very significant. Then languages, it works equally well in languages. The English internet is vastly bigger than any other internet, and so therefore you will have much more of that data being gleaned from English sources. China is relatively behind a walled garden. It's a walled garden, and largely their internet presence is on apps, so it's not as prevalent. Hindi and languages are even lower. And then it is instructable. Even when you do a search result, it asks you, what to do next. Did I satisfy you? Is this the way you wanted the result to be? So it teaches itself, and you have to be patient with it, like dealing with a super intelligent but irritating person. That is the way you develop your relationship with artificial general intelligence. It has been evolving throughout this period of time. It is a known fact that, say, an ordinary electric iron today, a steam iron, it has more computing power than NASA had when it sent a man to the moon in July '69. Each one of your phones, I'm assuming all of you have a fancy smartphone, has more computing power than the entire planet had at the peak of the Cold War. And 4 billion people have those kind of phones. So in the last 10 years alone, 300 crore people have come into the possession of a smartphone. So how can our lives or marketing remain the same as it was in '69 or 1982? I've covered this. But let me now go to the context. The first context is the change that we are seeking is actually only an acceleration because the change was already upon us. Since this morning, or the last year, or the last 2 years, or in fact the last 5 years, everything that you have done is filtered and somewhat curated algorithmically. What does that mean? So when you picked up your phone, the Gmail that you saw, the way in which your mails were categorized into folders, or when your phone pops up with same time last year or memories of a trip to Scotland, all of these are as if it is gauging your subconscious and giving you content. That texture is artificially created. So it is crowdsourced. Even to linger on something means you are being listed. But it was not always like this. Earlier, in the gatekeeping era, a magazine editor, a fashion week organizer, the editor of a newspaper, these were the people who decided whether I should give Vipul a chance or not. Today, in the Insta world, the algorithm will decide based on propensity of people to consume and others like those, what is commonly called the cohort. So if something is profound, it will not necessarily be popular. And if something is popular, it is not by definition profound. So if you take the example, say Vincent van Gogh, who is now enshrined as one of the greatest painters of the West, he sold only one painting in his entire lifetime. He died at 34, but he did not manage to become commercially successful. If he was on Instagram, I can tell you he would be a failure even sooner because he would have no physical means. So your clicking self is what they are checking for, and your clicking self is not you in entirety. It is only a manifest behavior of yours. But here, even to linger is amounting to, like my father, who is not very proficient with systems, he told me a few years ago, he said, I have an interesting observation. Whichever company you join, Google News starts to give more news of that company, because he did not realize that he is consuming more news of that company, and so it's coming to him in a food. Of course, I did not tell him that that was the reason why. I said, yes, I make such a difference that lots of news starts to appear. But this is the adaptive system by which your Spotify day list, your Instagram mood board, the way in which your mails are organized, And your phone today sitting next to you knows more about you than everybody on the planet put together. Of course, there are some things you would not have shared, but this is not the forum to discuss those. But by and large, everything else, like where you are sitting today, you cannot tell me the latitude, longitude, but your phone knows at this point in time. You cannot tell me how much interest has compounded into your account since the morning, but your phone knows today, sitting here. It also knows how many people have tried to reach you. It is that data is sleeping with every other data on your phone. Forget the app ecosystem, just the phone is picking up more than 100 signals. So if Vipul and I bought exactly the same phones, downloaded exactly the same app, say Netflix, and then went about our business doing exactly more or less the same things on the phone except for what we do otherwise, 3 days later even the thumbnails will be different because it is able to pick up everything else that you're doing. If this is not artificial intelligence, chatting with a bot is not artificial intelligence. So our whole entity, our whole identity, the way culture is created, consumed, disseminated, is being controlled algorithmically by only a very few ecosystems. Last year, for the first time, the world had $1 trillion of advertising revenue. If you keep aside ByteDance, Twitter, Snap, and many of the smaller entities, it's about $150 billion. Still, $700 to $800 billion of advertising was digital, and it was broadly divided between the Google ecosystem and the Meta ecosystem. And all of this, the For You feed is algorithmically controlled. So it's not an experiment. It is vastly, vastly profitable. And this will only get exaggerated with time. Now, why is it that no one thing satisfies us, is because everything has become smaller, more capsule, and you have to keep doing this through the day. Is because if one thing satisfies you, then the model doesn't work. The model is meant to have constant, perhaps shallow attention, but at the bottom is the same model of selling attention, engagement, and eyeballs. So if it is advertising that is being sold, and if the first thing you saw on Instagram in the morning completely satisfied you, then there is nothing more to do for the rest of the day. And this model doesn't work that way. So you will get smaller and smaller format peaks into a great world which you like, but to do that you have to be constantly doing this. There's no good or bad, this is just the way it is. And even as a content creator, if you have to be successful, you have to subscribe to the platform. You cannot go outside of the platform. I don't know of any large, except YouTube, long form video has practically disappeared. So has reading. So another impact it's having is on our engagement window. How long can we pay attention to something? When is the last time any of us read 300 pages of text in a book uninterrupted? After every 5 or 7 pages, you will look for your phone. When the flight lands, the first thing I see, if we had an Olympic medal for putting on WhatsApp as soon as the flight landed, we would win gold every 4 years, undoubtedly. We are, in a sense, chained to this algorithmic world. And because the more you consume, the more you see of the same, and the more you see of the same, the more you consume. So it then becomes a filter bubble as well. This is all AI in action in every moment of our lives. Now, what is the consequence of this from how we engage with AI? Firstly, familiarity is becoming more important than newness. So say if Vipul was the editor of a magazine earlier, and if I was an aspiring photographer, I would keep sending him prints of my photographs. And then after a while, it was his discretion, his judgment. He said, you know what, I think Shubhranshu takes great photographs. Let me give him a chance. Today, the internet world is free admission, but the social world is driven by what you already are or how you are already liked. So a new guy will not get a chance on a new platform and become great overnight. For that, they will have to subscribe to the way in which the platform works. And what is the most common evident example of that in our lives? That sequels are becoming more popular. So when I was growing up, Govinda had an endless number of number one movies, Raja number one, Hero number one, and we used to make fun of it. But actually, the world of content narratives has become exactly like that. everything is a sequel of what worked in the past because you just want familiarity and a twist. You are not in the platform going to get new stuff because everybody is only consuming things which have worked in the past. So you're becoming more and more and more living in similar experiences. The person who works in my father's house in Jaipur asked me a couple of months ago in Hindi, he asked me, who is Kim Kardashian? So I was most amused because obviously he got that because she was here for a few days for a wedding, and then it came into his world on the social media radar, and he has now got to know of her. So this is the first time also, thanks to algorithms and artificial injection of content, that people are famous simply for being famous. We don't know who they are. How many of us know the last, any 3 Nobel laureates of the last 5 years? Anybody? Show of hands. Do we know the name of one scientist who made the COVID vaccine happen? 1 out of the 3. But how many of us know where the parade for the India T20 victory happened, Coldplay? Because this is the world in which all the attention pings that are happening are in this controlled world. So what is significant is, my son, when he was in class 6 or 7, had bragging rights to somebody else's son because when you do a Google search, I happened to appear more than that guy's dad. So he was feeling till that guy came back at him and said, what's your dad's net worth? And then we never had that conversation. So this is the world we live in. And it is interlocking. So distribution is more important than content. No matter how great the content is, if it doesn't reach you, it practically does not exist. This thing is saying time is up and it's beeping. So I feel there may be like an explosion directed at me or something. And it's beeping and flashing rather hard. Ambience. What does ambience mean? It is like the music that plays in the elevator here. It is always on. You don't need to pay attention to it. You can work on top of it, but if you're in the mood to listen to it, it can be a great experience. It's like spa music, right? But in culture, if there are important topics, Bombay mein hui barsat, all of that is coming to you algorithmically prompted by AI. But kitni barsat? Why did it rain? Where did the water fill up? Have we taken remedial measures? Did we go back and check that? Nobody has time because by then we have moved on to the Bhishan Garmi, then third day, Bijli se 3 mare. And this thing is always on. And it is algorithmically controlled because the more you consume it, the more it consumes you back. So it will become trivial and trivial and trivial. And the reason why it is difficult for marketeers is because triviality has no entry barrier. Profoundness has entry barriers. You want to create something which will be remembered for generations. It's a tough job to do. If you want to feed something which will be in circulation for the next 3-4 hours, relatively easy to do. Now, there is another significant impact on the marketing funnel itself, which is the origination of search. For many of you who would not have heard of me or known of me, either now or later, you will go to a Google and search for who the hell is Shubhranshu Singh, itna gyan de raha. Now, the reason why that is important is because then it directs you to a host of blue links. And that real estate is also paid for. It is rate carded. So if I ask, where should I have coffee? It may not tell me to have coffee at the Taj Santa Cruz. It may tell me to have coffee at the Starbucks near the airport. Because it may be my previous disposition. I may have done that. It may be because there is better revenue emerging there. Now that is changing because search has become answer. Effort has become conversation. So on the one hand, we had traditionally, quality, memory. What is a brand? A brand is a memory structure, intimacy, being famous as a brand, and having really great craft. Now that has shifted completely to being quick. Everything has to be quick. Distribution, relevance. And this, by the way, is jumping from internet onto other things. So if you see linear TV news, yes or no? Answer me right now, yes or no? So this is not leaving any dialogue. And then they say X is saying this, Y is saying this, and then the interlocutor becomes the judge, and I am saying this in matter closed, we move to the next thing. So this kind of exaggerated acceleration is happening in everyday lives. I write about that. There is algorithmic anxiety because I don't know what I have missed, and I feel afraid. Have I missed something significant? The trick is that nothing very significant remains away from the radar for long. So the emergence of answer engines is actually a great idea, because now it is collating and giving you a conversation instead of a search. But the flip side of it is, at least in the blue links, I have to go and make more effort. Now I will start taking their take on things with, there will be some degree of corroboration or indexing, but I pretty much download everything. So my son goes to play tennis. Day before yesterday, he had a flu. We said, don't go. Then after 5 minutes, his mother and I are telling him, he says, okay, I'll not go. Chat GPT is also saying, it's not go to play, do exercise when you have a cold. So this is the way in which information, what is held high, what is not given importance, is all being curated. I've covered this. Interesting thing is, there's between 175 to 200 billion dollars of the search economy sitting with Google. Perplexity has 34 people sitting in a shared office facility in San Francisco, already $1 billion, even before C-series funding. It's like that joke when somebody said, don't you know, Meta has, or that back then Facebook has bought WhatsApp for $19 billion, I think it was. The other guy says, कोई ज़रूरत नहीं थी, फ्री में डाउनलोड होता है, खरीदने की क्या ज़रूरत थी. So the more number of people are on the bandwagon, the higher the valuation, and this is all in the domain of AI or AGI minus the interface. This is happening every day. Synthetic media is another thing. Earlier, I used to pay agencies for iterations, to take a brief, to come back with a key visual, a script, an idea. Today, the acceleration at which content will be created, we should reconsider the model of time and effort, and we should consider the model of end outcomes. Now, it is difficult, what is synthetic and what is natural. So here, there's a 50% chance you will get it right, because you have to name 2 out of 4. In any case, there's a good, it tends to regress to the average of 50%. But as you can see, it's actually the middle 2 that are humanly created, and the farther 2, which are normal looking images, which we would expect a camera to take, which are synthetically created. So we will not know what is synthetic, what is real very soon. And this is not me saying it. Hollywood was on strike for close to 90 days, because they will take your body scan, they will take your voice sample, and after that, you will create. And it is improving dramatically. So if you go even in 15-day intervals and say, Shubhranshu Singh riding a cycle on Amalfi Coast, the kind of output it will start giving you is dramatically different every 5, 7, 10 days. I'm going to skip through all of this. How do we, as marketeers, or even as citizens, as ordinary people, what is that commodification? How do you see the difference? Is you keep it away. You keep it away for 2 days, don't go to a subject, explore other means, then compare what you are being told and what you have learned otherwise. And that otherwise generally has to be not ad contaminated. I'm saying this with full responsibility. I'm an advertiser. I spend a lot of money on advertising. When I say ad contaminated, I mean the listing of it. See, because the whole thing was created on the premise that UI, UX is for customer experience. At one point in time, they said, "Arey, itne sare log aa gaye hain. How can we give you chronological, synchronous feed? So you know, there are billions of people here. We will tell you what is important and we will feed it to you." Now, that is a bit of a dodge, because when you have a list, it is a value judgment. A list is a value judgment. What goes on top, what goes next, what goes at the bottom. You may be ranking it for any metric, number of people engaged, number of people who saw it, number of people who shared it. But that is the crowd. Why did you feed me this first, this next, and that after, is in itself a value judgment. So you have to keep the source of it away and see the world normally before you come back to it. And then you will begin to get, same with AGI, you begin to get a sense of how is reality real and how is reality fabricated. And the problem is we soon may not be able to tell the difference apart. This is now positively going to explode, so I'm going to end now. Another thing, many of us are not even seeing the freeware available. There are a number of MarTech, AdTech options. There are a number of ledger-based, as in, there are open source and ledger-based options which give you verification. So ad fraud, for example, there is a whole suite of services now available which will put a bolt-on audit trail to whatever a large platform may be telling you. And it is important for us to explore these because firstly, it doesn't cost us money. And secondly, even if it does, it's way smaller than what we would do otherwise, the hundreds of crores of rupees that we spend otherwise. Let me get to one last piece before I shut up. Netflix. How many of us have Netflix here? Right. Now, a newspaper has an astrology column for predictions every day. Even they divide humanity into 12 sun signs. But Netflix can tell you everything about your interests by taking 3 genres and representative 2 or 3 movies. After that, your destiny is their landing page. It is a matter of fact that their algorithm actually, it's called pragmatic chaos. And the underlying methodology is singular value decomposition. So Amitabh Bachchan in a romantic movie, directed by Rishikesh Mukherjee, Amitabh Bachchan as angry young man, Amitabh Bachchan as angry young man where he dies, hence a tragedy. Amitabh Bachchan as an angry young man where he wins, hence happy outcome, but lots of blood and gore. So this is the way, and the cohorts are more than 99,000. But how many of you search on Netflix? It is a very broken, clunky search. You cannot search more than one variable at a time. And even as you're searching, it starts to prompt you. Why? Because their model is not based on you demanding what you want. Their model is based on they telling you, Vipul saw this, people like Vipul saw this, you saw this, your cohort saw this, this is it, this is what we are promoting. And because you don't have the means, the felicity with which to investigate what lies below, you simply start consuming, and after a while the pressure also builds up. Oh, have you seen, what was that, Mirzapur, have you seen this, and then, oh, I'm missing out something, and then you are riveted. And the more and more you see it, the more and more that world starts to repeat. Whereas they have the means to make it the most engaging and freely searchable option. It's a good business model. I mean, if I was there, I would do exactly the same thing, by the way. And then there is reinforcement learning, so you end up saying, and thumbnails, please pay attention to thumbnails. They are changed and personalized at the level of 1. That is the most brilliant personalization that is being practiced in the internet domain. So in ending, we must get beaten up. We must spend 200, 250 hours starting now on 3 or 4 different LLM models. Please make mistakes. Please check your level of understanding with what that system is telling you. Check exactly the same stack on another system. If you go to ChatGPT, you go to OpenAI, Meta, you check and compare. Do the same search on Google, do the same search on Perplexity. You will start to see the facets of understanding. You will get beaten up, but this is no risk because you will not get beaten up to the point of being thrown off. It is like boxing. The one time you have been beaten in the ring, after that every single time, it's less painful and you are a better boxer. So hopefully if everybody does that, then we will end up like this. I mean Muhammad Ali, not the guy on the floor. That's all I had for you today. Thank you very much.